So, we remember when I reviewed The Phantom Menace and how good I said it was, and that it was a really good read. Because it adds scenes, and it didn't say expanded edition at the top of the book. I can't tell you how much that's irritating to me. But Attack of the Clones by R.A. Salvatore is an interesting read. So, it's basically the movie. But before I get into like what's added, I have to give a little backstory on this. So this is not the first Star Wars book R.A. Salvatore's written, let alone the first book he's written. I mean, he's famous for Forgotten Realms and Dungeons and Dragons. That's his niche right there. But unlike Terry Brooks, who only ever wrote The Phantom Menace, R.A. Salvatore wrote a very polarizing book called Vector Prime. Vector Prime, beginning of New Jedi Order, was a very, whether you loved it or hated it, it's a very different Star Wars book, and it kills a certain character off, and the fans hated it. Not everyone hated it. I didn't hate it. I was very sad, but I didn't hate it. Matt Wilkins didn't hate it either and actually defended it when it came out. But R.A. Salvatore was treated like absolute garbage by a lot of the fans on the forums and got death threats, and it was a very, very nasty time for him. So, whether it was George Lucas or himself or just Lucasfilm came to him and said, "Hey, we're sorry. Would you like to write Attack of the Clones?" So, I mean, mind you, how many authors have written, like, movie novelizations, especially at that time, that have written other Star Wars books, like, as, not to be, like, blunt, but, like, lesser Star Wars books. Writing the movie novelization's a big deal because, let's be honest, people who read the movie novelizations don't necessarily read the expanded universe. So, and at the time, he was the first author, well, besides Alan Dean Foster, who wrote an EU book and then the movie novelization, because I don't count Alan Dean Foster because he's not credited for writing the original Star Wars. It's credited as George Lucas. We all know it's Alan Dean Foster, but he was the first to be credited for writing a Star Wars movie novelization and also writing an EU book. Which, to this day, it's become a little more common. Like, we had Alexander Freed write Rogue One. We had Matthew Stover write Revenge of the Sith. Jason Fry wrote Last Jedi. And of course, Alan Dean Foster came back to write Force Awakens. And Karen Traviss wrote The Clone Wars. But he was the first. What did I think of this book? It's okay. It's kind of forgettable. I had read this before and didn't remember any of it. Let's get into the positives, though, of this book. Number one, there are scenes added that were actually filmed by George Lucas that were cut from the movie that I've seen fairly recently because I talked about them in Queen's Shadow. They're kind of redundant. They need to be in the plot. The next thing is he changes some of the dialogue in it because Attack of the Clones has some really bad dialogue. I mean, really bad. We all remember the sand, this is in this, but there's more to it that makes it actually, okay. There's a reference to the Phantom Menace novel in Attack of the Clones, which I was shocked. And it's in Phantom Menace, Anakin helps a Tusken Raider. That was not in the movie. In fact, I don't ever think it was filmed. But he helps out a Tusken Raider. That's referenced in this, which I thought was really cool. We have more scenes with the Lars family to establish Shmi's relationship to them. So when Shmi is taken, which does happen at the beginning of the book, I mean, it's a couple chapters in before we actually get to the movie, which I always like, unless it's really drawn out. Cough, cough. Revenge of the Sith. Yeah, we get into this. We see Owen and Klieg go with a bunch of farmers to hunt the Tusken Raiders down, which goes really bad. We get to see Klieg lose his leg, which is pretty graphic. And yeah, overall, there's a few more scenes with Count Dooku, which I am a big Count Dooku fan. We all know this. And if I can get more Count Dooku in my life that isn't Dave Filoni Clone Wars Count Dooku, I will definitely take it up on that. The bad. It's not all the positives of this book. It's not enough to say this is as good as the Phantom Menace novelization, because it's not. I mean, I don't know. Something that really stuck out to me is Boba Fett is not the same character that he is in the first Boba Fett young adult novel, The Fight to Survive. Boba Fett's more cold in the Attack of the Clones novel than he is in the young adult story. For instance, when we get to the arena fight, he's very enthused with it. Whereas in the young adult novel, he kind of comes off as, like, mortified. So, yeah, that's different. Also, Jango Fett is not referred to as a Mandalorian in this, ever. That was irritating. He's referred to as a Rocket Man. I mean, this isn't the Elton John song here. Come on, people. Also, these are just like nitpicks here. Oh, the lightsaber forms. So I don't know if the lightsaber forms were officially named yet in the canon. I don't know. I want to say they were a thing already, but R.A. Salvatore writes lightsaber battles pretty well, and he goes into like the different saber forms, but you know how the saber forms all have their own names, and then they also have their own number designation. For instance, Count Dooku uses Form 2, which is not very common. R.A. Salvatore says that he uses an older lightsaber form that no one seems to use, and that's why he can keep his up with Obi-Wan and Anakin and Yoda to a certain extent, because he's using Form 2, but it wouldn't be good against blaster bolts. These are all details that are in Form 2, but it's not called Form 2 or Form 2's actual name, which is escaping me. It's the same with any of the lightsaber forms. They're described as what they are and what I know they are. And this is like a nitpick because like the average person reading this book is not going to know what the lightsaber forms are called or that there are different lightsaber forms. The fact that he's going into detail and explaining it and yet keeping up the story is good enough. It's just for like the extreme fan like me, it's like, come on. You can go into more detail than that. Overall, though, it's a very solid read. It's not as good as the Phantom Menace novelization, but it's still pretty good. I give it a 4 out of 5. Would recommend checking it out. Join me next time as I review Black Spire.